Welcome back, legends. I hope you're all amazing. On today's video, I am finally checking out a Marshall Silver Jubilee. A big thank you to Martin and Jake for hooking this video up. Martin has loaned me a bunch of his awesome Marshalls in the past before, and this amp belongs to Jake. You guys are legends beyond legends for making this happen. I've been talking about doing this for so long, so I should stop talking and I should let you hear it. Let's hear it in a bit of a jam. Start out with the lead sound we heard in the jam. I had the exact same settings on the amp for both guitars, and I did add a bunch of reverb and delay in post just to grease things up a little bit. I've turned the delay off and I've dialed the reverb way back. Currently, I'm running this 1990 Les Paul Custom with a Burstbucker 1 and 2 pickup set straight into the front of the Jubilee. That's going to the Saint Rock reactive load where I've loaded up my free cab IR. Then that is going straight into my DAW. With the gain cranked, the bass cranked, the treble at around 8, the treble and presence controls at noon, and the two master volume controls at around 1 o'clock. We get this really thick, creamy lead sound that I associate with players like Joe Bonamassa. Sounds pretty bunter, and we will hear those settings boosted a little bit later in the video. The thing that I find the most interesting about this amp is the EQ section on here. It is so different to your typical Marshall tone stack, and I'll give you an example of this, especially with the bass and the treble control on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to back off the lead gain to around 7 or 8, and I'm going to play a couple of chords with the bass all the way up. I'm going to bring the bass down. You'll hear this point where the bass response changes massively, and it goes from that big, thick lead sound to something a lot more percussive. To me, it's taking it from that Bonamassa style creamy lead to more of your classic late 80s like slash rhythm sound. Let's hear that. I really can't stress how subtle those changes are on the pots. I was taking the bass from around 9 or 10 down to maybe 8 or 8.5, and you could hear how that massive booming low end got totally tidied up. Similarly, with the mid-range control, you only have to take it down from 8 to around 6 or 7, and it sounds pretty scooped. The treble control is very sensitive on there as well. And an interesting part of the circuit is on the clean channel or the rhythm channel, there's this input clip control that's only meant to work on the rhythm channel, but when you activate it by pulling out this gain control, it also affects the sound on the lead channel. Let's hear that. You bring the mids down a little bit closer to noon, it gets super scooped, tight, and thrashy sounding. I find that really interesting. What I'll do now in drop D, I'll just chug a low D power chord and I'll bring the mid-range up from 0 to the point where you really hear it kick in. This is super interesting. about the Jubilee being very different to your typical Marshall, but it has still floored me how different it really is and how sensitive those controls on there. And it actually reminds me less of a classic Marshall and more of a Mark Series amp. And hear me out on there. On a Mark Series amplifier, you have very sensitive controls and you have the 5-band graphic EQ where you can make some radical changes to the overall tone. Much like the 3-band on here, you can hear there's very distinct points where it just gets way too much or way too little with the controls, and they have these very, very sensitive sweet spots. Furthermore, you can get super smooth, creamy leads out of it, like a Mark Series amp. It sounds fantastic for boosted thrash tones, like a Mark Series amp. And it probably came out at a similar time, I'm guessing, to maybe the Mark III, somewhere between the Mark III or the Mark IV. So yeah, there's some similarities in there, while it is totally different to use, obviously. You know, you don't have to set the bass, middle, and treble for the pre-EQ gain structure and then use the 5-band. That's all kind of baked in on there. We also heard a couple of sounds in there boosted with an SD1, which I really like the sound of with any Marshall and of course with this one. So if you pull the output master, you go over to the rhythm channel, and the rhythm channel has this input clip setting on it. So I'm going to do that. You pull this particular knob out here, and this again surprised me, because when I think of the sound of the Jubilee, I would think that it would be the lead channel sound that I'm associating with, but I think it's actually this like rhythm input clip sound. It's really interesting. I'll go back to my favorite settings on here where I had the bass just below 10, the mids up around 8, treble and presence, where were we? Somewhere around noon. And I'll start with a gain around 6 or 7 on there. let's hear the rhythm channel without the rhythm clip, basically the clean channel. And this one is interesting because on the input gain control, the higher you take that, the darker it gets. Pretty typical behavior for a Marshall amplifier with a bright cap on the input. But then I find you've got to balance that out with the overall output control on there. So you can think of that input gain as a combination of like pre-overdrive and brightness. So if you want that a lot brighter, you turn it down and you turn the overall master up and then balance out the EQ. If you want it a little bit darker, then you've got to turn that input gain up as high as you can get it without it overdriving and then balance that out with the output master. So we'll start with the input gain control around 8 out of 10. Prefer having the rhythm clip engaged and then using the guitar volume to clean everything up. Before we go, let's hear the lead channel with the Strat. For such a seemingly simple amplifier, the Jubilee really does have such a wide range of tones available. Look, I knew what I was getting into when I fired this amp up, but it still surprised me with some of the things that it could do, with how sensitive the EQ is and how that interacts with the way you play into it. It actually does feel like playing through a different amp when you've got that bass cranked up with the mid-range up and the treble back versus the mid scooped, the bass dial back a little bit, and a little bit more gain happening on there. It's very immediate and percussive at some settings, and it's very smooth, squishy, and forgiving at others. And in that respect, I think it is very unique in the Marshall lineup. It definitely belongs in the pantheon of classic Marshalls. And if you're chasing that slash sound or that Bonamassa sound or an amp that can do super tight thrash metal when boosted, you need to have a Jubilee on your list of amps to try. It may not be the perfect one for you, but if you're chasing those sounds and you haven't actually gone and tried one, don't be like me. Don't wait until you're in your late 30s to try one. Try one out as soon as possible. So again, massive thank you to Martin and Jake for making this one happen. Let me know your thoughts on the Mighty Jube in the comments below. If you want to see any more videos with this one, like say maybe compared to the JVM or compared to some modelers, or if you want to hear some captures with this amp, please let me know in the comments section below. A shout out to my amazing patrons who support me on Patreon. And as always, if you want the free IR, it's linked in the video description. Now grab your guitar and make some filthy guitar noises. I'll see you next time. Thank you.